Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's live stream. First one in a while. How's everyone going out there? While we wait for a few more people to join us from various parts of the world. Here in New Zealand, we're in a lockdown right now, which means that we are not allowed to leave our homes. We're doing a trial run of 30-day trial run of socialism, communism, see how it goes. You're not allowed to leave your home unless you're going to get medical care or you are going to see a doctor, a pharmacist, or you are going to the supermarket. You can go out for a walk around your neighbourhood, get exercise and stuff like that, and do all those kind of fun and exciting things. But beyond that, we're in lockdown to try and to control this bad boy, see if we can get on top of it. So how's everyone else out there doing? What's happening in your neck of the woods? While we wait for a few more people to join us, why don't I play you a song? I'll play you a song that I wrote for my daughter. Not a long song. It's a silly song, in fact. So let's start with a silly song, shall we? And it seems rather appropriate because she can't go anywhere at the moment.
Today, oh Ellie, where you gonna ride today? Ellie, 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 I don't know. Ellie, 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 I don't know. Oh Ellie, where you gonna run today? Today, Ellie, 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 I don't know. Ellie, 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 I don't know. Oh, Ellie, what you gonna do today? Oh, Ellie, what you gonna do today? Ellie, 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 Ellie. Ellie, 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 I don't know. Ellie, 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 I don't know. Ellie, 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 I don't know. Oh, Ellie, what you gonna draw today? Oh, Ellie, what you gonna draw today? Ellie, 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 I don't know. Ellie, 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 I don't know. Ellie, 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 I don't know.
So there you go, silly song that I wrote for my daughter in this time of quarantine. Where are you going to run today? Nowhere. So here we go. Oh, Matt the musician says, same lockdown situation here in South America. What part of South America are you in, Matt? And what's the lockdown for you guys like? In New Zealand, you can go out for a walk, you can go to the supermarket or to the pharmacy or the doctor. Or if you're an essential service worker, you can go to work, obviously. Oh, that's very kind of you to say, mate. People often say that. That guy's got an ugly face for a voice like that. Did he fall out of the ugly tree and hit every branch on the way down? Thanks for that, mate. Yeah, she does. She often asks me to play it. It's one of our bedtime songs. Yeah, there is nothing like belting out a song, right? Cheers, guys. Right, so, yeah, I suppose we should... I want to talk about Star Wars because I was set a challenge. Someone posted for me a challenge the other day. Thanks, Jose. I'm essential content. someone sent out a challenge to me the other day, and they said, could you rewrite a Star Wars trilogy? But here's the thing, you have to rely on what's already gone before. So you have to count the Disney trilogy as part of the lineage of, and the chronology as part of canon. How would you write a new trilogy? And so I thought, what a great challenge. So I thought we might try and do that today together. But before we do that, oh, you've got a curfew. Oh, there you go. So you're in Peru and you've got a curfew. They're talking about curfews here. So far they've resisted that. Yeah, I think honestly, I think there comes a point at which you say, the measures get too draconian for what's going on. In New Zealand, we've actually, we're so far away. Our government acted a bit slowly on it, for sure, and there's still flaws in the policy. Like if you come into New Zealand, as long as you say you've got, and you I guess you highlight for them how you're going to self-isolate for 14 days, they let you just go back into the community, and with a promise that you'll self-isolate. The police ring you every now and then to see if you're at home, and you say, yeah, I'm at home. Didn't go to the supermarket today. And that's a massive flaw. If everyone else is in lockdown, it seems that's just dumb. Considering in New Zealand, our highest risk group for actual contagion and bringing the virus to our country, all of our cases so far, apart from 6, we've got about 700 I think now, have been linked to overseas travel. So it's like, why not just shut the border with a quarantine? Doesn't make any sense. But apart from that, we're sort of ahead of the curve. We've only had 1 death. And that was that 3 or 4 days ago, an elderly lady who had it. We've got, I think, a total of, I want to say 7 or 8 people who are in hospital with it at the moment. 2 are in ICU, but they're stable. So we're sort of, we've got this thing locked down, but we've got these bizarre conditions around us. So, like, you're not allowed to have a funeral. No funeral, no burial. So if you've got a family member who dies of cancer, happened to a friend of mine just last night, close family member died of cancer. His elderly mother's sister died of cancer in a hospital alone. No one's allowed to go to the funeral according to the law. No one's allowed to go to the graveside. It's just obscene. And it's I think that's an overreaction, especially in the situation we're in. Yeah, it's like one of those cooking shows. You've got 3 ingredients and one tastes like garbage. In France, same for groceries, doctor, 1 hour to walk, and total lockdown at night. Oh, that's interesting. So you're allowed out for an hour. So in New Zealand, they haven't sort of stipulated. They've just said you can't drive. A lot of people here would drive, and we would. We were going to take our kids to the beach the other day. Beautiful sunny day, and we were just going to get in the car, stay in our little bubble, our family, drive to the beach. You can walk miles away from everyone else and just take a walk on the beach. The beach is about an 8-minute drive from our home. Not allowed to do it. So you can walk around your neighbourhood, but you're apparently not allowed to go too far. So yeah, it's a fascinating situation that we find ourselves in. But yeah, anyway, so when we get onto the Star Wars challenge, I was set the Star Wars challenge. Can we rewrite a new trilogy? I thought we might try and have a crack at that today. Play a few songs, and also talk about what I think are some great pandemic movies, since we're in a time of pandemic, probably worth considering. So before we do that though, we may as well get the elephant, the viral elephant that's in the room, sitting there in the room out of the way. Not so much an elephant in the room, it's just a whopping great bloomin' red blaring siren of doom. Here's my thoughts, and I'd love to hear your thoughts as we go. Yeah, it is a tragedy, Dan. Dying alone, I think, is disgraceful. Absolutely disgraceful. There's just no reason why you can't have 1 or 2 people at a funeral. There's ways to. I've talked to healthcare professionals, I know, and they've told me there are ways to mitigate this. Because here's the thing: in New Zealand, you're still allowed to go to the supermarket. You go to the supermarket as much as you need to, and so what you get is you've got everyone coming to supermarkets. Yeah, sure, they stand 2 meters apart, but they go into the place, they touch shelves and cans and everything else that everyone else is touching, and they're all breathing the same air. And it's just makes no sense that with that going on, you can't also have like 3 or 4 members of a family attend a funeral at a closed, not a public place. You could have them go to the graveside, open air. Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. So I think in regards to the COVID-19 thing, I don't. It's funnily enough, I don't think the media is helping much now. They sort of went, and out in my country anyway, that's what I've noticed. They've gone through a bit of a cycle. So initially, it was announced last Monday that we were going into a 4-week minimum lockdown. It looks like now it's going to be longer, and they're dropping all the hints to prepare for sort of 6 weeks or more. So 4-week minimum lockdown. And so initially when that was announced, they said you got 2 days. So Monday afternoon they announced it. Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. lockdown starts. So you had 2 days, and so the media were quite helpful in those first 2 days, and they were saying, here's what the lockdown means, here's what essential services are, all these kind of things, helpful bits of information. And then it's sort of, as time has progressed now, the media's got back into its mode of being unhelpful again. And so we're starting to get into some of that typical media sort of mode of operating that they've been in for the last few years now again, which is not really helping. It's certainly, you can see how the media has become politically weaponized on this. It's so fascinating. I was watching something the other day where different media outlets in America are saying that we don't think at the moment we're broadcasting the White House press briefings live, but we're considering whether we should just stop doing that, because we think that we might be better off just picking the snippets out that we think are most important for you to see. And I'm like, whoa, hold on. I don't think that's what your job is actually at this moment. Even if the Commander-in-Chief is saying some things that are a little bit cray-cray at times, those briefings should be live. Like, there's no way you should be inserting yourself into that and deciding what people should and shouldn't be hearing, especially at a time like this. That's insane. Here in New Zealand, our Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, and the world media are doing a bit of this as well, she can do no wrong. It's like a lot of carrying water for her, no real questioning of some of the policies. And it's interesting because some of the mistakes that have been made are the same mistakes that Boris Johnson, Trump has made. Slow to act, not perhaps recognising the threat as quickly as they could have. And it's interesting how whenever Trump does something, it's questioned. Whenever Boris Johnson does something, it's questioned. But our Prime Minister, it's just there's just almost no questioning. There's a little bit starting to happen now, but we need more of it in a time like this, really. So that's not very helpful. A lot of fear too. People are really fearful. And that's never a good thing. That is never a good thing. The reality is, I think it's important for people to get their head in the game here and get a bit of context. This thing is serious. And if it overruns your healthcare system, man, that's not a good situation to be in. But the reality is that this is a virus where you have, according to the data we've got at the moment anyway, worst case scenario, it's over 98%, or just around 98% survivability. And so that's an important piece of context. And a lot of people sort of have lost that. 1% of your population, or almost 2% of your population dying, or of people who get it, even, is a high number of people in almost any country. It's a lot of people. But the point is that it must be sort of put into some sort of perspective. Otherwise, all that fear is just going to lead to all sorts of disasters. CJ and the Perdition says, I think that's their job. I think that's what the media probably thinks too, that it's their job to, this is the model they operate under. They've got to get you clicking, click on headlines. That's how they drive their revenue. And so it's going to be delicious if, there's lots of fear involved in it. If it bleeds, it leads. That's what they say in newsrooms. Basil, thanks for the super chat. They destroyed Luke Skywalker. That was the unforgivable sin. The reason the Seagull will not bother with future Star Wars films. Just wait, mate. Just wait till you hear my Star Wars film. Thank you for the super chat, by the way. That's really, really helpful. It's very, very kind of you, especially at a time like this. It's amazing how a lot of people now are facing, uncertain economic futures. It's hard, eh? There's a lot of unknowns too. This is the interesting thing for me about this virus. There's so much we don't know. There's so much that we're still trying to figure it out. Because one thing I think it's fair to say is that lockdown is not a long-term strategy. We're going to have to learn to live with this virus. Because you just can't keep people locked down for months on end. You just can't. Human beings are communal beings. We're supposed to be in community with other people. It was already bad enough in the West before this, where people were sort of self-isolating with technology and through the way society was sort of breaking down in that regard. But to actually lock people down in their homes, you just can't keep doing that. It's a recipe for disaster for the human person. It will take a huge toll. There's fascinating research I was reading about, accounts that I was reading about some years ago, about how the old, several hundred years ago, they had a model of prison that they thought, well, the best thing to do with a prisoner was to put them in a cell in isolation by themselves, and they'd put a little window, usually at the top somewhere, And the idea was you'd sit in the cell by yourself and you would get right with God and make up for your awful, heinous crimes. And they thought this was the best way to treat prisoners. And what the accounts from those periods show us is that basically people just routinely went mad. They had no human contact. They began to unravel as a human person. Didn't do anything for them actually, being penitent for what they'd done. It just unraveled them as human beings. And I would say that you don't want a situation where the supposed protective measure is worse than the virus. You unravel human beings. Like in our country, we know we've got the data that during this lockdown period, we know there'll be an increase in domestic violence because people are stuck at home. We know, and they can't run away from it. There'll be an increase in mental health harms and suicide and things like that. So these are real issues that really matter. And so you've got to sort of start saying, well, we need to find a better solution. We can't just have everyone locked down for another several months. That's insane. That's not. You can't stop functioning as a society just because there's a threat. You really can't. What are we saving? What are we preserving? What the heck are we doing? We save society. 20 years time, we're all locked in individual little bunkers communicating. It'll be like what was that film, Surrogates, that Bruce Willis film? They're all just attached to their computers and they never go out. They all live in a virtual world. Yay, we saved the world. No, we didn't. But there's lots of unknowns. We don't know much. We've still got to find out more about the virus, how bad it is, how widespread it is. One thing that's pretty clear now, though, is that China has absolutely lied. China has lied, and they did this. We shouldn't be surprised. In 2003, they did this with SARS. For those who don't remember that outbreak, go and read the New York Times article from 2003 about how China underreported their cases of SARS. And they've absolutely done the same thing here. There's just no way it makes any sense to think that a population like Italy, which is 20 times smaller than China, has now well over twice the number of deaths in that country. That doesn't make any sense. Remember, China were the first to have this virus hit their shores. And so to suggest that they were the most prepared when this brand new thing just appeared in their society first, they were the first ones and they were the most prepared for it. No, that's just, I'm sorry, it's just not believable. And there's lots more data now starting to come out that, China lied, people died. That's about it, right? And the World Health Organization has been a bit of a disaster. The information in the last week or two has been a bit better, but my gosh, you go back and read the history of this. When the history of this is all written, people will ask, what the heck happened with the World Health Organization? At the beginning, they're like, no, there's no reason to stop travel from China, to and from China. Then they were saying, I remember at the time, if you go back, I think it was on one of my live streams in February, it might have been. I can't remember when it was, but I was watching the World Health Organization talking about this, and I'm thinking, this doesn't seem like a very good strategy. They're just heaping glowing praise on China. And I'm like, are they trying to appease China as a strategy to work with them? But now I think it was just very, very political, man. Apparently someone said, so I've heard that as well. I read a couple news articles saying that they've reopened their markets in Wuhan. I don't know if everyone's read the paper out of that Chinese university. It's circling around on the internet. It was published some weeks ago, but it's from a Chinese state mandated and run university. Where they looked at what they think the likely source and cause of the virus was, and they believe it came out of at least one of those two labs that are in Wuhan that handle the virus. It's not a biological weapon, but that it was probably complete ineptitude, and they're recommending in that paper that they need to increase their security and quarantining measures. So, for example, is it the horseshoe-nosed bat? I think it is. Was it the horseshoe-nosed bat? I think it is. The horseshoe-nosed bat is the source. That's the biological material that's in the virus, so they know that's the animal that's involved. But they don't sell those at the Wuhan markets. So apparently, as I understand, I think the paper identifies it's 900 kilometers away. No, 900. I think it's 9 kilometers. 900. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's quite a wee way away. The nearest actual markets that sell that particular animal. However, those animals were the test subjects in those Wuhan laboratories. So they were using those particular bats to test the coronavirus, to explore a version of SARS. And apparently there's indication that they're quarantining protocols were not up to standard, and it's probably just walked out on someone's shoe. There's also indication that they may have been using their old test subjects. They're selling them just to the market, to that market. So that's possibly how it's got there. It's insane, but yeah, that's and the usual typical reaction to that often in the media has been, are you saying this is a conspiracy theory? It's a biological weapon. It's like, no, that's not what they're saying, and it's not what anyone else who's logical is saying. What they're saying is that this virus got out of a lab because of totally lax security in China and ended up in the general population. That's what they're saying. So yeah. Remember Orange Man Bad? Yeah, that's funny, eh? And they're still going on about it. It's like, the funny thing is they all forget he was taking the same advice, but you go back and look at all of the governors in the states, and even the media were downplaying it. Remember that whole don't stay away from the big Chinatown festivals, and let's congregate in groups. In Spain, apparently, they had big feminist marches around the country, and the government encouraged people to attend them when they had something like, I think it was 500 or 600 corona cases in the country at that stage. And they just sort of put that aside and said, yeah, come to these marches. And apparently now I think there's people suing the government over that in Spain. So, yeah, it's crazy. That's where the media doesn't help. New verse to Billy Joel's We Didn't Start the Fire. Oh, yeah, it's about right, eh? It's about right, man. What a mess. But that one thing I'd say about the unknowns is, so it's clear what it seems now. I'm trying to read widely lots of global experts to get those who are saying, lock everything down, those who are saying, hey, let's take a more measured approach. There's lots of information floating around at the moment because there's lots of unknowns. But I think it's clear, it is becoming more clear that testing is essential, and in particular antibody testing, the blood test, to try and figure out who's actually had it in a population, because that's really important to know. Because if your caseload's really high, but it's only like the tip of the iceberg and there's a whole lot more people in your society who've already had it, that's a very different scenario. And you've sort of got to figure out what's going on. Is this a second wave of it, for example? So that's important. We've got to get our head around Italy, I think, ASAP. What the heck happened in Italy? What's going on in Italy? Now, they've got a 30% elderly population. Here in New Zealand, I think it's about 13%, for example, like less than half that. So that's going to factor into it. We know that everyone in Italy who has died, I believe, has sort of coexisting or pre-existing comorbidities, they call them, underlying health conditions as well. But it's important to sort of get our head around what has happened in Italy. As I said, the world is now dealing with a brand new virus because China didn't tell the truth. We all thought we knew what it was, but we didn't know what it was. So, yeah, here we are. And on that happy note, it must be time for another song, I think. I'm just trying to think what I should play here. I'll tell you what. I'll play a song I wrote for my wife some years ago on the day we got married.
Come dance with me, we'll own the stars together. Come take my hand, we'll walk this path together. I remember the first time I saw you smile. I heard you laugh and it was magical. Oh, I hung on every moment, every word, but time seemed against us. Come dance with me, we'll own the stars forever. Come take my hand, we'll walk this path together. We were standing at the altar, there were nerves and joyous rapture and beautiful you. Oh, a free and total gift of self, a life lived completely for the other. Come dance with me, we'll own the stars forever. Come take my hand, we'll walk this path together. When we've shuffled off this mortal coil, we've run this race and time has no more for us. We will look back on the paths we've walked and we will know that he was always leading. Come dance with me, we'll own the stars forever. Come take my hand, we'll walk this path together.
So there you go. The song I wrote for my wife and played for her on the day that we got married. Good to see you, Gio. Sleep well, mate, in Greece. In France, in the beginning of the epidemic, 3,500 person gathered, cosplayed as Smurfs to break the world record. I read about that. I thought that was satire when I first read it. I thought, no, this can't be true. Would they really do that? Oh, good old France. Oh, man. Dan says to the tune. Sorry, let's go back a second. Jose says the idiotic president of Mexico was up until very recently openly advocating people to go and eat in restaurants. That COVID is a hoax. That's funny, isn't it? I remember not long ago that the president of Mexico was sort of being touted as the better version of Donald Trump by the media in America. It's funny how these things happen, eh? Dan Smith says the tune of I Shot the Sheriff, I Shot Harambe, but I did not eat the Chinese bat. I shot Harambe, but I did not eat no Chinese bat. That would be awesome. Maybe I should write that song. Oh, that is so good. That is so good. Oh, man. Where are we? Is it Jose again or Jocelyn says what do you think about the European Union handling the coronavirus epidemic? I love your profile pic, by the way. What do I think about the European Union handling of it? Wow. You'd have to say that hasn't this just proved that the European Union probably really isn't good for what it's supposedly good for? Remember during the whole Brexit thing, everyone was saying, we need them, we'll be in trouble without them, and what are we going to do in times of crisis? And that was sort of one of the lines of reasoning I heard for staying in the European Union. But a lot of countries are actually finding that they haven't. I know Italy has received, I don't know if they're receiving help now, but as of last week, they weren't receiving any help. So from the European Union, so you got to say, what the heck is that all about? What's the point of having a union if you're all just on your own anyway? It sounds suspiciously like some sort of dodgy power/tax rip-off to me. It's a Ponzi scheme. Yeah, give us your money. Trust me. If you give us your money, there's definitely a payout coming at the end of this. And it ain't paying out, right? CJM says, in the UK, the mainstream media have run stories. 3 Conservative MPs catch the coronavirus. 2 paragraphs later, 5 Labour MPs self-isolate. Yeah, it's funny. Our parliament was so slow to act. We had a politician who'd been exposed in New Zealand, and they were still running parliamentary business as usual. And they just carried on like this was only a couple of weeks ago when it was really clear that it was a global threat and we were in a position to actually protect ourselves quite well. They were still carrying on. They were passing. In fact, they spent almost 2 full days of Parliament passing one of the most extreme abortion bills in the world into law. That's what they were doing. Sorry, that the camera does that every now and then. Don't panic, listeners. We're about to come back on air. Apologies for that. Chubby Teddy Monster Productions says, wow, you're amazing, Brendan. Very heartfelt. Makes me miss the singer-songwriters era. Your guitar picking is clean. Yeah, well, wait till... I've been doing a couple of live streams on my Facebook page, actually, to sort of some of the more local people with a glass of whiskey and a few more covers, a few Irish covers, and the picking gets a little bit unclean by the end of the night. Thanks, Michael Droid. Go and cook for your kids, man. Look after them kids. That's awesome. I'm less important than your kids. Feel free to come back and join the stream soon. Yeah, someone's asked me what the guitar is. This is a Maton. So if you can see that, Maton. That might help you. These are really awesome guitars. My wife got me this as a present. They're made in Australia, actually. I'll just double check that they are still made in Australia. Yep, Australian handcrafted. So my wife, the first year we were married, we've been married for almost 16 years now. First year we were married, it was my birthday. I woke up, we were living in Auckland at the time, and she says, I've got a surprise. And so we jumped in the car, had breakfast, jumped in the car, and then went down to the local guitar shop. And she said, pick anything you want. And so I chose that Maton because I needed a guitar at the time. And so I that's such a phenomenal guitar. They craft the guitar out of one single piece of wood each time. So they use the same piece of wood, and so each one has a kind of a unique tone. My younger brother, who's a very good guitarist, he came up to stay with me about 6 months later, and he saw the guitar and played it, and he was so captured by it, he went and bought himself one, sold the guitar he had and bought that instead. So there you go. Where are we? Sorry, just trying to keep up with the comments before we get into the Star Wars thing. I want us to write a Star Wars movie together, to a trilogy, to how we fix. I've got some basic ideas, but I need you to help me with the rest of the Star Wars situation. Where are we? Jose says, yeah, it looks like the EU is on its last legs. I don't know, did it have legs? The wooden legs, maybe. The Russians are helping the Italians. Yeah, it's interesting. So I didn't know that. Well, there you go. Russia is helping Italy. They're not in the EU, but sent a plane with medical supplies. Isn't that fascinating? Yeah, funny, eh? I think we might discover now just who really are the genuine altruists and humanitarians in the world in this crisis. And that's not a bad thing. You pull back the mask and see who the wizard really is behind the curtain. European Union is a good concept, but an awful execution. If you look into the history of its creation, it was mostly an American project. Yeah, and I think that's the thing too. I'm not averse to this idea. I know some people get very conspiratorial and say it's all about power and control. I think that's where these things very quickly and easily go if they're not well grounded in virtue. But the idea of it is not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea to have a common humanity and concern for each other. The problem, though, is the frailty of human nature, and how human nature is very easily corrupted, especially when you introduce power. And so the whole idea of subsidiarity is important. Subsidiarity is this principle that governance should be carried out at the lowest point in the hierarchy where it is most appropriately used. So I'll give you an example. The government, the state, should not parent children. Parents should have that authority. They're lower than the state, the government, but that's where the authority to parent children belongs, with the actual parents of the children. The government should never step in and say, right, now we're taking over, you have the kids and we will parent them. So that would be a violation of the principle of subsidiarity. And I would say there's a similar principle operating with countries. Countries are most suited to govern themselves, not having super governance with some sort of union. And even lower than that, local communities are even more suited than central government to govern themselves. And it's not to say that these other things can't exist and play a certain role in the background, but the authority, the governance authority, should lay where it's most appropriate. Matt says you should play more random songs in more of your videos. It's quite nice. Clears the mind. Oh, thanks, mate. I'll try and do a few more today too. High five. It's mind-boggling, says Dave, how much unknown musical talent there is out there compared to how relatively few artists are mainstream and how narrow their music is. Yeah, I agree with that. There's a lot of people we just don't know about, who are really good. I've encountered some amazing musicians in my time. Absolutely amazing. I count some of them as my friends here in New Zealand, actually. Just phenomenal musicians. Speaking of scotch, I just poured myself a scotch with a drop of peppermint oil and ice, my own invention. I might have to try that. Peppermint oil. I don't like ice. I'm not sometimes when I travel, if it's a bad whiskey, I'll have ice just to water it down a bit. A little drop of water is what they recommend, and what I've been doing for a few years now, just to open up. It opens up the flavours. It's an important chemical reaction. Unto Destin 8 says, my Vietnamese mum makes me drink her own anti-corona sauce. It contains so much garlic, that I'm actually glad I have to stay away from people. I don't think that's a corona source, mate. That's a self-isolation source. Very good tool. No one will want to come near you. CJM says, I have an isolation exemption letter and the police were stopping people around the corner from a supermarket and handing out fines. Yeah, it's bizarre, eh? We've had some issues here where the police have got a little bit heavy-handed, I think. How's this for classic? This week, New Zealand set up a number to dob in your neighbour. And this is how they're talking about it in the media. Dob in your neighbour if they're violating the rules. Like, this is not good for social cohesion. Hello? And how's this for proof? So many New Zealanders rang the phone number when they announced it, that it crashed the system. That's insane. It's Bethel here. I'm sure I've seen Cheryl out and about for a longer walk than she's allowed. This is insane. Like I said, it's a 30-day trial of communism. Queues at the supermarket, not allowed to leave your house, no funerals, no religious services, and your neighbours dob you in. Oh, welcome to that world. Yeah, you should check it out, mate. That's a great Australian guitar making company. Agreed about parenting. It's not conspiracy. It's just history. You can look at Jean Monnet with the link with the US and most facts because of declassified files. Yeah. Look, I agree. I'm not saying what you were saying was a conspiracy, mate. That's not what I'm saying. Instead, what I'm saying is that the conspiratorial sort of mind might be tempted to think that every time you set up like a United Nations, that's nothing more than a grand conspiracy to take control of the world. The United Nations was again, the execution's been terribly flawed, but the idea was sound. They were trying to respond after World War II to what had been a great time of crisis and evil in the world. They just got it wrong. The execution. It's human nature, right? But yeah, so I wasn't saying that what you were saying was conspiratorial. So just in case anybody thought that. Rich the Obscure, love that name, recently read an article from 2019 regarding the impact of influenza in Italy between 2013 and 2017. It stated the following: Italy showed a higher influenza attributable to excess mortality compared to other European countries, especially in the elderly. That's interesting, eh? As I understand it, there's a question of air quality and high rates of smoking as well in Italy. That may have a contributing factor here. But yeah, whatever happens, they are living proof. You don't want your healthcare system crashed, that's for sure. We're heating up a bit in Phoenix. Anything that helps. Yeah, you guys are going. We're on the wrong end of this, unfortunately. You're going into the right end of it. You're going out of your cold and flu season. We're going into ours here in New Zealand. We are now, in fact, the New Zealand modelling says that the coronavirus epidemic, if you like, pandemic for us in New Zealand, it will begin, community transmission would begin early April. Well, it's actually already begun, and it would not peak until August. So that's right through our winter. That's hardly surprising. Snitches get stitches. Oh, look at that. A Gibson Hummingbird. Yeah, wow. Yeah, a Gibson Hummingbird. Mate, I am jealous. I've owned a Gibson in my time. I also owned an Epiphone, the poor cousin of Gibson, made in the same factory. Well, they used to be. I used to be an Ovation guitar player. I had several Ovation guitars. I was a big fan of the Ovations, the old Hawaiian back, I think they used to call them. But yeah, then after a while, I wanted to have something warm and a bit more lush, and sort of the sound that matured over time. And I was looking actually at Martins do that. There's a guitar brand, I think they're made in Canada, actually called Seagull. And Seagull are really, man, a friend of mine had one, which is so beautiful. Here we are. Indoctrinated Turtle. G'day, mate. Good to see you. Welcome aboard. Welcome to the stream. 40 minutes in. You're a bit late. Someone write that down. Write down he was late. There you go. So your daughter's on the Gibson Trail already. Yes, there we go. Here's the thing. Jose says, I wonder if the media is over counting deaths from underlying conditions as COVID deaths in their official counts. There is a question about that, right? But even if that's happening, there's still a spike happening. So even if they're not dying of the COVID, the COVID is speeding up their deaths. So that's obviously still a factor. Desert Mav says, I have an Epiphone Les Paul, and it's a great guitar. Actually stays in tune and plays nicely. Mate, Les Paul. Yeah. I had a friend who had a Gretsch. It was always sort of the competition, Gretsch or a Les Paul. What else did... my brother, my younger brother's a very good guitarist. He's a Strat, Fender Strat man all the way. I actually love the sound of a good Strat. You can't beat a Strat that's played well, that's properly toned out of an amp. Man, you can't beat it. Nowadays, farmer companies have to test on different races. They didn't do that back in the time. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? As I understand it, has anybody got a link to the article? I'd love to see this. My wife was telling me about this the other day. She was reading an article that apparently blood type has something to do with this as well, which is interesting. Certain blood types, I think it's A, are more prone to issues with the virus. They don't know why. They still don't know why. There's all these big unknowns about this. Disappointed black. I'm a Yamaha man myself. FG730 with the rosewood back and sides just resonates so thunderously. Mate, you can't beat a good Yamaha. But let me show you what I've got. This is my other guitar. This was a look at this thing, man. It's lived some life. This is a guitar with a story to tell. This was my mum's guitar. In fact, my dad might have bought it, and then my mum played it for a bit. And then I learnt on this guitar, and I taught myself guitar. So what happened was, for the first 2 weeks I was playing guitar, I couldn't figure out why nothing sounded right. This is a funny story. I had a chord chart, this awesome little chord chart that my mum had owned back in the day, and it had all the capo markings and little cardboard cutout holes in it, and you would pull this piece of cardboard along, and it would tell you what key you were in if you had a capo on. But it was a great starting point to learn chords, and it had a picture beside each chord to tell you where your fingers should go. The problem was this, and I didn't know this for about 2 weeks. Whoever had printed it, the chord images were printed upside down. So instead of a G being like this, the fingers, I was trying to play it down here with 2 up top, and nothing sounded right. So, and then 2 weeks later, someone said to me, why are you playing those chords that way? That's not a G chord. And so once I figured that out, then I actually started to teach myself properly, and I just started to practice the chords, listen to people I knew who played guitar, and then just started playing songs, and then sort of from there started writing, and then just started singing with it as well. Because I was a drummer. And I thought to myself, man, I'm playing drums, but all the girls seem to be talking to the guitarists. So I think what I'll do is I will become a guitarist, and then the girls will talk to me. Well, I became a guitarist and a singer, and it turns out that it wasn't the drums that was the problem. So I needed better aftershave. So I wasn't perhaps as handsome as I thought I was. And so, but good aftershave and a guitar helped that. But this guitar, anyway, this is an Aria concert guitar. I'm dubious of whether it really is a concert guitar, but an Aria concert guitar. I can even tell you when it had the sticker somewhere. I think it's gone. Oh no, here it is. Lewis Eady Music Shop in Auckland, and that's a sort of an institution. It was bought there in the 70s by my mum, I think, or my dad. Then had stickers all over it. They got cleaned off. I learned to play on this, and then it got sort of junked at my mum's house. It got left there and sort of it just I keep banging it around. It just got sort of ended up in the garage and this weird storage place with nothing happening to it. And then I came and collected it around the time my father died, actually 2 years ago. And I said to Mum, do you mind if I actually take that away? It's got some sentimental value for me. And so it had no strings on it. And sorry, I keep banging this. It's already been dinted up quite badly. It had no strings on it, and the tuning heads were munted on one side. I don't know what had happened. One of my little brothers, who actually, my youngest brother, is a very good musician in his own right. He's a bass player and a guitarist. He now works as a music producer in New Zealand. He was working for Neil Finn in his studios, Roundhead Studios. Those who know Neil Finn, Crowded House, he's also now in what's Neil Finn in? Fleetwood Mac. He's in Fleetwood Mac now. So my brother works for him and with him, and so he taught himself on this as well. And then it just got junked. So I got it. I replaced the tuning heads. I think it cost me $5 or something to get 2 of these things, and online, and put new strings on it, and it's back in business. It's my sort of muck around sort of. So yeah, it's actually all right for what it is. It's a humdinger that I taught myself to play on. Desert Mad says, I've actually own a Japanese Telecaster also. Yeah, people love the Telecasters, eh? Strato, mate. Stratocaster. But anyway, Telecaster is a pretty good guitar, right? Drummers get all the ladies. Guitar players are too sensitive and overrated. Here's the thing, mate, about drummers. I used to be the butt of all the jokes. You know, what's the difference between a drummer and a drum machine? Well, you only have to punch information into a drum machine once. How do you know that your stage is level? Your drummer is drooling out both sides of his mouth. What do you call a guy who hangs around with musicians? A drummer, right? I used to hear all of those jokes. Not laughing there, are you? Thank you, CJ, for that super chat. It's very, very kind of you. CJ, sorry, the super chat. My exemption letter say sir at the top. I'll probably get in trouble for misgendering the officer. Stay safe, everyone. Yeah, Roger Taylor. He was. So he's a good-looking dude, though. You know, there's good-looking drummers. You know, most drummers are animals. That's why Animal on the Muppets was an animal, because he was a drummer. Anyway, we should let's get on to the Star Wars thing, eh? And then maybe another song, and then we'll talk about pandemic movies. Has anyone seen the new trailer? Talk about perfect timing. The Jared Butler movie, Greenland. It's coming out soon. It's about an asteroid hitting the Earth, and they've miscalculated, they miscalculated or lied, but all these. It's a planet-killing asteroid is coming to wipe out the Earth, and it actually starts hitting the Earth, and everything unravels. I was like, that's a very appropriately timed trailer. So if you get a chance, watch it. Not now. Don't go now and watch it. All right, you're busy, but afterwards go and watch it. Yeah, that's the trick, mate. When courting my wife, I won over her folks playing my old cheap guitar. I tried to win over my wife with a guitar initially. I met her at an event. And man, she's such a beautiful woman, and I was just captivated. And I thought, you know what? I've got to pull out my best magic here to win this woman. So what I've got to do is I've got to get a guitar ASAP and play a song that I wrote. So that was my plan. I played it, and she's there with a group of people, and she goes, yeah, that was okay. I was like, what? That was okay. That's all I've got. That's the best. I've got nothing more. It turned out all right in the end. COVID would have served as a more believable death for Jeffrey Epstein instead of him not killing himself. Well, hasn't Weinstein got it now as well? Has he got it? Or is this one of those things where all these celebrities are lining up to signal about how they've got them in COVID? Man, celebrities. Imagine there's no celebrities. Yeah, that was great. I actually did, and it was awesome. Okay, so Star Wars Trilogy. Here was the challenge that I was set by someone. In fact, I'm gonna go to my YouTube channel right now, and while you wait there, and I am going to find this. Your channel. You might hear a little bit of noise here. Don't panic. Where's my community? There we go. Okay, so here's the challenge that I was set by someone. Let me read this for you so you can understand why we're doing this. Where's the comment? This is great, isn't it? This guy's tech savvy, mate. Okay, from none other than our friend who's here with us tonight, a disappointed black man. I would love to see a video of how you would write the next trilogy to Star Wars, but there's a catch. You have to use the sequel trilogy characters to start it off. If you just can't make it work, then explain why. As a writer myself, I like thinking about this as it gives me a reason to write. I would love to hear your take on this. Well, here we go. And I'm going to start, and you guys are going to help me finish this, because I'm not sure if I will be able to finish this by myself. Yeah, it was your question, mate. It was your question. Yeah, Jose, that's a good question. Why did Weinstein get tested over other people? That just don't make a lot of sense to me. But maybe I'm just a simple guy. I'm just a humble guy trying to make his way in the universe. Okay, so Star Wars, the new trilogy. Here's how I'd start with your challenge. How do you write a new trilogy? Well, I'm going to retcon. I am absolutely going to retcon the heck out of this baby. Here's what I've got as a start, and feel free to pitch in your ideas, and let's see if we can make something coherent out of this. First of all, everyone is long dead. I'm not going to follow up 5 years after Rey was standing at Tatooine burying lightsabers. I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start well after that. Every one of the current characters is a gone burger, because you've got to start and wipe the slate clean. I believe that's the only way to actually do this. So what you do is everyone is dead, and what's happening is, I've talked about this before, this is how I think that episode 7 should have started. Basically, the Republic is falling into civil war again. There's the usual human frailties, if you like, and the lack of virtue and power and corruption have started to make themselves felt. People no longer recognize the threat of the Empire. That's a long forgotten memory. The First Order, long forgotten memory. And what's happened is people have become complacent. They've become comfortable. The galaxy's relatively sort of, I guess, opulent and well off. People don't have much that they want for, but it's bred a virtue and a moral complacency in people, and it's also bred a complacency about actual threats around power and everything else. And so what you've got is the Republic is now, you've got factions that are starting to arise. And so I think that's probably how I would create sort of my initial... With Star Wars, I think it's always good to have a human, what you might call a human villain, and then the sort of the overarching super nemesis, the evil Sith Lord, if you like. And so that's sort of where I'd probably get my human villains from. And I would probably, what I want to do is try and avoid, I think, but let's talk this through. Let's workshop this out, team. I probably want to try and avoid the whole idea of going back into the old, what we've seen in the previous two trilogies, previous three trilogies, which is the overarching sort of Sith Lord trying to take control. Perhaps it's about something else. What I was thinking is the ring mythology that that inspired Lord of the Rings. I think the whole idea of power is so important here, and it's very much at the heart of Star Wars as well. But this whole idea, I think, of power and gaining something for power and control, I think would be a good idea, because it's so corrupting on people. And so here's what I do. So the galaxy is starting to fall into civil war again. There's factions, there's problems. You've got actually now a republic with bad people in charge. So or people who don't care, they're greedy, they're doing things that the Republic, when the rebels started, we first met them in A New Hope, they were very much, they were the good guys, and they were altruistic, and they cared about humanitarianism, and they wanted to fight the evil oppressor. So that's a great concept, but I want to now put the Republic in a situation where they're in the position of power, and about how the usual human frailties have crept into that. Just give me 2 seconds, folks. I'm going to fix a camera issue here. There we go. So the human frailty thing has now taken over, and you've got people in charge in the Republic who just they've let their own greed and corruption, like happens in any government, sort of take over. And basically, here's what we know about the backstory. This is where I'm going to retcon things. Basically, it's going to be revealed through this trilogy that the events we saw in the Rise of Skywalker basically were a lie. They were not true. So there's a guy, I'm calling him Darth Furious. Hopefully that name doesn't exist already somewhere, but it probably does. Darth Furious, as in Darth Nefarious. And he is also known by some as the Great Deceiver. And basically what he did was he was behind the events that we saw in the Rise of Skywalker, basically. That he lied about Palpatine and he lied about Rey. There was no return of Palpatine. Palpatine was long dead. He lied about Rey being a Palpatine. It was all a lie. Now we'd obviously have to figure out, well, what would her lineage be then to explain why she had these powers that she had, because that still needs explaining, and this trilogy still hasn't adequately explained that. But it was a lie. And the reason he told that lie was because he wanted something that Luke Skywalker had hidden away, because Luke Skywalker, I was thinking maybe some sort of powerful kyber crystal, that a new type of, very rare type of kyber crystal that no one has ever possessed before, like the Ring of Power basically, and that you wield this thing and it has powers beyond just what we've seen previously in Star Wars. And so it's a very dangerous thing in the wrong hands, and this is what Darth Furious wanted. And he lied. He created this whole scheme because what he thought was that Luke would actually turn up to battle him, would turn up to that battle in the final battle, but instead he died after not even turning up on Crate. And so he didn't expect that. He didn't expect Luke to project himself. And then when Luke did project himself and died, he thought, okay, Rey must have been given this crystal. He must have given it to Rey. So that's why he lured Rey into that final battle and lied to her and everything else at the very end. It was all a plan to try and get the crystal. But of course it wasn't there. The whole thing unraveled. Obviously there's a bit of writing and explaining that needs to be done there. This is sort of very basic what I've got. But basically I definitely want to retcon that rubbish. And so you can put Palpatine back where he belongs as dead. You don't destroy the legacy of the story. But at the same time, you use what you've been handed, the awful blooming deck the awful hand that you've been given. You've got to play with it. And so that's sort of what actually happened there. And then what happens is, over the trilogy, you've got the villain basically comes to believe that perhaps if he can get a hold of Luke and Leia's lightsabers, and they can be deconstructed, so he can secure them from Tatooine, and he can deconstruct them, that somehow together there is a map there to where this ultimate power device is. And so he becomes obsessed with trying to track that down. And then of course you have the good guys who and I think what you do is you follow one person. No Mary Sue's, no Gary Stew's. You have a hero, and if you're really worried about the question of gender, then have a brother and a sister and put them together on the quest. And what you do though is, my thinking though was initially you go back to having a young man who would call others into his team, if you like, into his fellowship as they go on this journey. But basically they are then in a race to try and get to this first. And what's happening around them is the tension and the drama is not just their struggle to actually secure, because perhaps there's a way to destroy this crystal that will actually eradicate. Again, I know, Lord of the Rings, but it's a powerful mythology because it's true. And it contains this truth about ultimate power and the destruction of evil. And so these themes it was not surprising that they would keep repeating in stories. And so basically what you have is they are desperately trying to find it first to actually destroy it, and the villainous characters are trying to get it so they can take power. And they believe they've got good motivations, by the way. They believe the Republic is failing, so they want to... I think what you do is you take your villains from one of the systems that has been victimized by the New Republic. And so they've been victimized by this Republic and by this order that doesn't care about them, and so they have become... they have turned with absolute hatred because of what's been wrought upon them by the bad governance. And so they decide they can do a better job, and this is the way to do it, take power. And then basically that drama is unfolding, that you've got this sort of interplanetary civil war going on as these two smaller parties are trying to get to and to gain control of this thing. And then what you do, I think, is you would have them, I think the whole idea of recovering the Jedi Order would also be important, resurrecting that, because effectively it's kind of dead, isn't it, really, now? But you'd want to resurrect it, and I think that you'd have to figure out how do you do this. I mean, if Mark Hamill was still around, you'd get him to act in it, I think, as a Force ghost. But if he wasn't, you'd probably have to bring voice actors into it, or you'd have to think about a way where they could perhaps discover the knowledge at a Jedi temple and actually begin to train with the assistance of Force ghosts and others. I don't see why you couldn't bring Ahsoka Tano, for example, much beloved character, into something like this. Ezra Bridger, why couldn't you actually do that? As you know, bring these people in, Force ghosts and everything else. I don't understand why you couldn't do that. And that's where I've got to. That's where I've got to. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you think we could actually fix this and make it even better. So here we go. That was your challenge, Disappointing Black Man. The philosophical battle between power versus humanity might have some use with this trilogy. I think you have to get back to authentic mythology. And authentic mythology is always grounded in virtue. It's always about human failings human nature, and the hope that humanity can overcome evil and choose to do good. And that's what this should be about. And so you've got to get back to that. And those most base and fundamental ways, you've got to bring those things back into this. So here we go. Here's a suggestion. For me, first movie, New Republic, learn the Sith are weirdly active. Cliffhanger at the end. We learn they are active because of external new threat. Second movie, New Republic, try and lose against the new threat. And I think that's a good idea. And that would add to that drama. And so you can still have all that playing out, but that now the whole system is in chaos. And so you've got these people, it's very much like Lord of the Rings, where Sauron effectively has overtaken Middle-earth. And there's this small little fellowship is trying to do everything it can to save Middle-earth, and they're on their own, really. And so, I think that's a good idea. Third movie, Jedis and Sith have no choice but to team up. Yeah, and I don't know about this. Is interesting because for me, the thing I loved about Star Wars was this whole idea of Sith as evil, as a privation, a corruption of the good, Jedi as good, even with their flaws. And so to have them teaming up, to me, feels too relativistic. It's sort of, I'd much rather that you have that clear-cut line where people have to actually choose virtue and good over evil. Someone says here, Indoctrinated Turtle, anything would be better than literally burning the law. I can't believe what they've done, eh? I'm kind of astounded. It's so badly handled. I look at this and I think to myself, how did it get to this point? They've really made a mess of this, eh? Wasted Mind says, so Jar Jar Binks finally given a Sith name. Yeah, that would be classic. I was going to wear my new Jar Jar Binks t-shirt today, actually. I might wear it in another live stream. I've got a great Jar Jar Binks t-shirt designed by a Japanese illustrator. I'll try and remember to wear it in the next live stream for you all to enjoy. Wouldn't that be hilarious? Me's a Darth Furious. Me's a gonna kill you. That would have been a great idea. I'd love to see a show of hands. Who thinks that Lucas actually did originally intend Jar Jar Binks to be an evil villain, a super Sith Dark Lord? I would not be surprised if that was true. I'm leaning towards that could have been the actual truth. I love that theory, though. Dan Smitham says, got to get back to the Greek tragedy. Lucas borrowed heavily from that. I agree, and it's that hero's journey. It's the archetypes, and the reason they're archetypes is because they are true. They're true for all of us. We struggle against things, and even in our own interior life, we struggle to be people who are virtue. But to win that struggle, you've actually got to be self-disciplined. You've got to build what the Greeks would call the habitus of virtue into your life. And so that's really what the Jedi mythology is all about. You to become powerful, you have to discipline yourself and train yourself and build virtue, and then you can overcome evil. Someone suggested that all of the Palpatine clones were breeding Snoke clones because they feed on them. That was disgusting, but also kind of weirdly cool. You're probably better than what we got too, right? It is weird, man. The whole thing is a mess. I just PTSD every time I think about it. You get the shakes. Not enough subversion. Better call Ryan Johnson. Yeah, Ryan, what can I do to subvert people's expectations with this film? As a punching ball for frustrated writers. The trilogy after episode 4 to 6 should have been about the children of Luke, Han, and Leia and dealing with an Imperial remnant under control of a new leader like Thrawn. I agree. My kids have been introduced to Thrawn recently for the first time through Star Wars Rebels. We've had a lot more time to watch stuff together. And so they've loved his character. They absolutely love it. That would have been, I agree, and that's what the Thrawn trilogy was all about, right? I think Matt just said, I think the bad guy who comes from an oppressed system starts off heroically. Second film becomes more evil. I'm thinking kind of the Tooth Sis, kind of like Che Guevara and Fidel Castro. Yeah, here's the thing for me. I think, you know what, I've been saying this for years, before the new trilogy even arrived. I believe the biggest failing with the prequel trilogy was the handling of Anakin's fall from grace. They didn't actually treat Anakin properly. And so I've been saying this for years, that the movie Chronicle actually provided a perfect template of what Anakin's fall from grace should have looked like. He should have been an older male, not a young boy, who was given this power but who had a broken family background. And the tragedy and the pathos in his own life began to seep into his Force powers and the skills he was taught, and then he began to abuse the power when a great moment of tragedy, like the death of his mother, fell upon him. And I think that that's what you could do with this new one as well. So you actually have someone who starts with everything. There's a purity of intention, almost a retelling of Anakin, but in a different way. Maybe 15 years after Rise of Skywalker, a new Jedi Order but fails by accidentally teaching the dark side to a bunch of students. The second movie would deal with Finn and his loyal Jedi to stop them. Oh yeah, that's not a bad idea. So give Finn something worthwhile to do in the story. Wouldn't that be awesome? You wouldn't need to include it, but even you go back, it's part of the backstory, and it's referred to that Finn actually did go on to become a great Jedi Master. That would be awesome. So you don't need to show it. It's just this part of the mythology now, and they refer back to him. The school of Finn or something like that. I am from the school of Finn as a Jedi or something. I don't know. Jar Jar is a villain, as he was the senator who moved the motion to give Palpatine executive power. Yeah. So this is how democracy dies. Just joined. What have I missed? You missed a whole lot of everything. We've just rewritten. We're rewriting Star Wars. How can you rewrite a new trilogy? I was set a challenge by a disappointed black man. You have to use the existing characters that exist in 7, 8, and 9. That's the thing. I've retconned basically, and I've said that Palpatine was a lie. That Rey was not a Palpatine. There was no Palpatine. He was dead. It was another Jedi, the Great Deceiver, Darth Furious, who was trying to actually get a hold of something, a powerful kyber crystal, more powerful than anything in the universe that Luke had hidden, and he thought Luke would come and battle him, and he would find it that way. But of course, he didn't. And so and then there's this future, well into the future, civil war unfolding in the Republic, and now some new parties have learned about this crystal and they want it. It is true. Lucas said Binks himself was the key to everything. It was true. It was absolutely true when he made that comment. I remember watching before that theory came out, and I remember watching the making of documentary and thinking, well, how's Jar Jar key to everything? It's so important we get this character right. In the third movie, a young Jedi learn what being a true great Jedi, be a great person. Yeah, absolutely true. Kyle says, frustrating as The Last Jedi was, I like the idea that anyone could have the Force, not just a chosen one. Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's something in that. There is something to this. That's not a bad thing to say that any person actually can become virtuous. You don't need to be born special with special genetics. I mean, let's face it. Lucas did muck around with the Force anyway in a bad way when he introduced midichlorians. That was a bad idea. Introduced materialism into what was mysticism. Mysticism works. Materialism doesn't work in that same way, and it just undermines so much. So, there was already mucking around going on with the Force. So why couldn't you do something good like that? Wasted Mice is easy to subvert people's expectations for new Star Wars films. Makes good Star Wars film. Easy to subvert people's expectations for new Star Wars. Make a good Star Wars film, Disney. Conquer evil within before the evil without. The rafter in your own right, exactly. Rey would probably die in the first movie, so there's my take. The protagonist would be Broom Boy. Yeah, I don't know about Broom Boy. Maybe, yeah, but that could work. Broom Boy. Yeah, he's there using the Force to sweep the yard. Sir Stone says, I agree that Jedi and Sith shouldn't team up. In the old trilogy and the prequel trilogy, defeating all the Sith was what brought balance back to the Force. Even Hawk, you missed it. We're talking about how to write a new trilogy. Dan says, what about showing the sequel trilogy as Rey being evil? Same story but different light. Now in the future, the galaxy is climbing out of the horror she's created. Oh, yeah, wouldn't that be great? But they'd never let us do that. Because what they would do is they'd say, no, you're undermining a strong feminine character by making her evil. But that would be great if she just turned to the dark side. What I was hoping for at the end of Rise of Skywalker was she was going to turn and her eyes were going to start glowing red. Yeah, maybe laughing like Palpatine. Bring in Felix J. Palmer, a Spanish sci-fi writer, as a writer. He can turn cheesy plot points into great, captivating stories. Even without being a Jedi, if only Finn had become a model for troopers who flew the First Order, and he would have become the real leader in the rebellion. Yeah, I agree. You want to talk about tokenism? You stick the character into a film, clearly because they're trying to say, well, let's have diversity, but then they just do nothing of value with that character. It's like, why not actually do something good with him? Make him a hero that actually people can look to and go, that's a hero. Yeah, putting him in charge would have been great. Even says I could help write a hypothetical Old Republic trilogy for the future. The challenge I had even was, if you missed it, was I had to write a trilogy. I had to write starting from 10, 11, and 12, but I couldn't. They had to write it with the new characters that exist right now from 7, 8, 9. Don't fail Finn. Let him and Rey become friends. Don't reduce him to a yelling buffoon. Yeah, I agree. Episode 7, 8, 9 were told the way an evil superpower might make propaganda. Classic Greek tragedy must be the way to go. Star Wars is a soap opera, according to Lucas. Yeah, I agree. Jar Jar fumbled his way into running the Republic. They missed so many potentials with the fall of the Empire. Like, what about the Hutt's cartel? Yeah, I always thought about that. Or the other crime cartels. Was it Crimson Dawn? Wasn't that a crime cartel? Interesting side note, Yoda means warrior in Punjabi. Oh, well, there you go. There you go. What about Akira Kurosawa? Lucas was very much into his samurai movies and borrowed a lot from them. Yes, he did. He absolutely did. But those films also, they tell a tale of virtue and heroism. There's no doubt about that. The Metachlorians were a meme. Hey, man, hope you're well. Hey, Jeremy. Thanks for being here. Have Luke take his younglings, I think he said young lungs, into a battle with Han and the Republic. Han dies in the battle and Kylo blames Luke. Make him turn to the dark side. Everyone would have loved Reylo if Rey was the evil one. Rey is basically like Bran Stark, a powerful character controlled by an evil spirit. It was so weird, eh? Here we go. My theory about the Broom Boy is that he's training to hunt Finn and Rose, who abandoned him, and all the children and never come back for them. Yeah, that would be classic. He's like, these awful people, I hate them. They left me as a slave. It's like it's Maximus. I'm husband to a murdered wife, father to a murdered child. I will have my vengeance. The last cool thing, like an evil Rey. Finn was such a wasted opportunity. The truth is, Disney had all the ability and resources in the world to make a wonderful sequel trilogy. Greatest cinematic catastrophe in human history. It really was, eh? They absolutely messed this up. Total token character. Finn was the only character I thought had potential until they turned him into a comedy relief. I don't get that, eh? I really don't get that. He was all of a sudden became C-3PO. The Hux family revenge. Thor Skywalker had some awesome ideas for the sequel trilogy. For example, that Rey was Kylo's light side that split off and became its own entity. Luke saw that coming and tried to kill him. Yeah, that's an interesting idea, eh? That is a fascinating idea. Could you do something with that? Yeah. Mate, the simple fact is that they failed miserably. But the truth is that they could have actually they could have written a good story. They could have written a good story, but they didn't. The process was corrupted technically and I think ideologically. Ideologically, obviously. Technically, in the fact that they didn't have an overarching plan for what they were doing and they didn't have creative control. I'm actually going to make a video soon, hoping to the next week or two, about another trilogy that actually showed how you can go back to an old property and do it right. And they've really done it right, actually. And they've created something really grand, I think. No animals on the Canto Bight. The plotting revenge. The Sporces. Wouldn't that be classic? The animals. Alex Jones. I don't believe that's the real Alex Jones. But the best sequel trilogy would be Luke waking up saying, what a ghastly dream. Go out and watch students train the new title crawl. How much do you think it would take for Star Wars fans to trust Disney? I don't think they will. I mean, Mandalorian might earn a little bit back, but Mandalorian's still got problems. Just because it's better than the sequel trilogy, it doesn't mean that it's that we're back to a level of storytelling you say is good or is great. It's definitely better, that's for sure, and it's watchable. But maybe The Mandalorian could earn it back. Strong second season could earn back some trust. I think also probably Kathleen Kennedy has to go. I think that would change the dynamic, because basically even if you announce now that you are making a new slate of movies, a new trilogy, and they said Rian Johnson is going to be the director, If Kathleen Kennedy was still there, people would, I would say, would still have a lack of trust. Luke should have been the centre character in all the sequel trilogies. Luke, teacher, fighter, then spiritual leader. Yeah, I tend to agree. That made so much sense. Hey, at least they didn't kill Lando. In worst case scenario, if they had to bring the Emperor, I would have preferred something like the architect of Vader's temple who possessed the helmet. Canto Bight, a Star Wars story. Wouldn't that be classic? Life as a slave. The time of oppression. Love in the time of oppression on Canto Bight. Wasted Mind says, I will never ever trust Disney again with Star Wars, especially for as long as the current regime remains in power at Lucasfilms. Right, on that happy note, I think it must be time for another song before we talk about pandemic movies. I've just got to send a quick text. So, I just need to do this. So that's classic. Urgent text comes in while I'm live streaming. This is classic, and I stuffed up the text as well. We'll try. This is classic. There we go. How rude of me, texting. There we go. Alrighty, so let's play a song, and then we'll talk about my pandemic movies before we wrap this bad boy up. My favourite pandemic films. Actually, no, I'll save the song for the end, shall I? Let's save the song for the end, and I'll we'll actually look at this my favourite pandemic movies. So get your hats on. Here we go. Here are my picks for best pandemic movies, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. So in no particular order, but even though I'd say probably the last couple are, I think, the best. Here's the first. I will say, I usually start with an honourable mention. I'm going to start with a dumb movie that people call a pandemic movie, but I think was just, man, it frustrated me. That was Blindness, the movie Blindness. Man, I found that so simplistically frustrating. Anyway, let's put that one aside. Here's my top viral movies. 28 Days Later. I think it was the better of the two films, that's for sure. Yeah, great film. Dealing with the aftermath of a viral outbreak. Yeah, borrowing from other things that had come before, but it was great. It put Danny Boyle on the map. It put zombie movies back on the map in a big way, and it also showed you that you could make something like that, and it had a real mainstream appeal, which I think was just awesome. World War Z. I loved the original book. The book was great. They stuffed up the movie a bit in that regard, but I think it's still a very watchable pandemic movie. A lot of fun. Yes, A Quiet Place is absolutely on my list. Phenomenal film. So thank you, Kyle. A Quiet Place is on my list too. So there you go. A Quiet Place, you've beat me to it. I Am Legend. Remake of Omega Man, and the other one with what's his name, and I can't remember now, based on the Matheson novel, short story. The CGI was atrocious, but I thought that as a film it was actually pretty watchable, especially for like a Will Smith sort of I don't know, a bit formulaic type thing. It actually was quite a watchable film. Where's the sequel? That's what I want to know. Clearly they were setting up a sequel. I'd love to know where that why that didn't happen. Zombieland, comedy pandemic movie. And I think there were some funny things in there, some funny little commentary in there, especially the Bill Murray part. That's really why I give that tops. But I don't think you can beat Shaun of the Dead for the best sort of pandemic film that actually was satire. I thought, yeah, Shaun of the Dead was great. Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Great pandemic movie. And what's so great about it is the pandemic just sort of unfolds around a much bigger plot. And it's so fascinating the way they make this all work so that the bigger plot is more important than the pandemic part of the plot. Not a lot of films do that. The Crazies, the remake of The Crazies with Timothy Olyphant. I enjoyed that film. I really enjoyed that film. That was a bit of a, I think it's becoming a bit of a, or has become a bit of a cult classic, but it didn't really hit the mark when it arrived. But that was a great pandemic film. 12 Monkeys. Brilliant film. Brad Pitt. Remember that? He's insane. So yeah, 12 Monkeys. That was I think that was the film probably that really proved that Brad Pitt had pretty phenomenal acting chops. If I remember my history correctly, I remember going to see that movie and everyone afterwards was talking about the fact that, wow, Brad Pitt, it's so different. He can actually act. So, but yeah, that was a great film. Great film. And the whole time paradox thing too. Good film. Outbreak. Outbreak is a classic. You can't beat Outbreak. And there's so much about that film that was great. And it still holds up. It's in my collection, actually. And it's a film that still holds up. I watched it recently. I think it was on TV or something. And that film still holds up. You can watch that film still and have a really enjoyable experience. Some of those films from that era, they have not survived well at all. This film actually does. I think Dustin Hoffman's probably a big part of that. Train to Busan. Train to Busan is a phenomenal film. Forget about Parasite. Forget about Host. Watch Train to Busan if you haven't. Best zombie movie in years. Best Korean movie, I think, in years. Really, really good Outbreak film. Children of Men has to get a special mention here because really the whole idea of infertility as a pandemic is a thing. So yeah, Children of Men and infidelity as a pandemic, I think, definitely deserves a mention. Survivors is a TV series from the UK. If you haven't seen Survivors, you've got to watch Survivors. Survivors, 2 seasons, I think 12 episodes in total, or maybe it was a bit more than that. I can't remember exactly. I used to have it on DVD, but you can watch it online easily. It's about a flu. It's a flu virus, and it's about the survivors of that. Very, very, very good TV series. And it still stacks up, still very watchable, based on a book. And lastly, and I think probably for me most pertinent right now, is the Soderbergh film Contagion. It's Contagion, isn't it? Yeah, Contagion, with Gwyneth Paltrow and Matt Damon. That is a great film. Like, it is. That film should have been called Prophecy 2020 because it got it. It's almost exactly on the money. Thankfully, the worst extremes of that film haven't quite happened yet, but that film is written to script. Clearly, they went and spoke to people who are specialists in pandemic planning, and they gave them what they thought was the most likely scenario for a deadly virus to actually make its way into the world scene. It's out of China. It's out from bats. And then everything else sort of follows, very similar to what we're seeing now today. As I said, thankfully the worst extremes of that have not unfolded, and hopefully we avoid those worst extremes. But definitely a great film if you haven't seen it. Well worth the watch. Right, with that in mind, because we've gone on for almost an hour and a half, you guys are awesome. I'll play you a song to finish with. And then I have to go. I've got another meeting to go to. That's what that text was about. Another online meeting. Can't beat an online meeting. So let me play you this song. If you love the content today, please don't forget to put a tip in the tip jar. There's a PayPal link in the description below. If you like the songs, put a tip in the PayPal jar. Really appreciate that. Super chats, they all help. Oh, camera problem. Don't panic, everyone. Stay where you are. But here we go. This is a song I wrote for my sister and for my brother-in-law. My mother rang me one day, and this is about 17, 18 years ago. She rang me and she said, your sister is in an ambulance on the way to hospital. They've just lost their first baby to a miscarriage, and so I sat down. I couldn't do much else, so I sat down, and I wrote the song for my sister. It's called She. Actually, I should figure this out before I start playing it. Let's take the capo off. that might be why it's not making sense to me. Yeah, that's better. So this is in the wrong key.
She will stand at this window ledge and watch your world from the very edge. She will see the daylight fade. She will wish for brighter days. She wants everything alright. No more emptiness tonight. And she will be in the light, in the light. And she will be in the light. She will walk this corridor and feel the coldness of the floor. She will call her Savior's name. He will love her just the same. She wants everything alright. No more emptiness tonight. And she will be in the light, in the light. And she will be in the light, in the light. And she will be in the light, in the light. And the sun and the moon and the stars in the sky will call her name out loud. There'll be no more crying, no second guessing, no chasing the shadows of doubt. All the voices inside, all the angels that lie will feel the wrath of a better time. The illusions resolve, the dreams dissolve. We'll feel the wrath of a better time. She will walk this corridor, feel the coldness of the floor. She will call her Savior's name, and he will love her just the same.
So there you go. A little song that I wrote for my sister and brother-in-law after they lost their first child to a miscarriage. You guys are awesome. Some very kind comments about the music, and I think we should definitely try and do more of this when we do our live streams. It's so good to have you. Don't forget, if you want to support the channel, there's a link for PayPal in the description below. On the top of the YouTube channel, there's also a link to Patreon and Subscribestar if you want to become a regular supporter. Every little bit helps. You guys are awesome, and I will be back next week. Absolutely, next week we're going to be back. So hold on to those horses. Hold on to those good ideas, and we'll be back next week for another live stream, probably around this time actually. We'll see how it goes, but I will let you know. So keep watching the social media and I'll update you there. You guys are awesome. I'll see you next time.